Okay, let's dive into this. We are looking at the absolute bedrock of order for one of the largest countries on earth, the Brazilian Penal Code. Now, you might be thinking a legal code from 1940, yawn, but actually, what is completely fascinating about this text is that it is a living, breathing document. Sure, it was born way back in 1940, but it has been meticulously updated, tweaked, and amended all the way through to 2025 to handle the crazy complexities of our modern digital age. In this explainer, we're going to decode this blueprint of justice, taking all that heavy legalese and turning it into clear, easy-to-grasp concepts. To do that, here's our roadmap. We'll quickly run through a estrutura da lei, o que constitui crime, as espécies de penas, crimes contra a vida, crimes contra a honra, and wrap up with a atualização do código. All right, Section 1, a estrutura da lei, or the framework of justice. To really ground us, just take a look at the official publication details here from the Federal Senate. This is the 8th edition of Decree Law 2.848, published in 2025. This isn't just some abstract theoretical concept we're talking about. This is the literal, physical codification that judges, lawyers, and everyday citizens rely on every single day to keep society running. And this brilliantly illustrates a key point. See that highlighted text? It notes that the content is updated right up to the closing date of the edition, packed with footnotes offering complementary info. So, despite its origins over 80 years ago, this text is in a state of constant evolution. It adapts. Moving on to Section 2, o que constitui crime, defining the act. Before anyone can actually be punished, the justice system has to be crystal clear on what makes an action a crime in the first place. And under Brazilian law, intent, well, it changes absolutely everything. Let's look at this comparison from Article 18. On one side, we have crime doloso. This means the person actually wanted the result or consciously assumed the risk of it happening. It's totally intentional. On the other side, crime culposo. This is an act caused accidentally, through negligence, imprudence, or just a lack of skill. The law treats these two mental states very, very differently. Basically, you cannot be punished for a crime unless you acted dolosamente, intentionally, unless it's one of those rare cases expressly permitted by the law.
But wait, what if you commit a crime to protect yourself? Well, Article 25 defines legitima defensa, or self-defense. The absolutely critical words to remember here are moderate and necessary. The law excuses a crime, but only if you use moderate, necessary means to repel an unjust, current, or imminent aggression against yourself or someone else. If you go overboard and exceed those boundaries, you're on the hook for the excess.
Now, here is a massive, fundamental number in the Brazilian justice system, 18. Under Article 27, minors under the age of 18 are penally inimputables. That is a fancy way of saying they literally cannot be held criminally responsible under this specific penal code. Instead, they fall under completely separate, special legislation designed specifically for minors. Which brings us to Section 3, as espécies de penas, consequences and regimes. So the crucial point here is understanding the difference between the two main types of prison sentences laid out in Article 33. We've got reclusão, which is the much more severe penalty. It's for major crimes and can start in a closed maximum security regime. Then there is detenção, which is for lighter offenses. That one typically kicks off in a semi-open or open regime, basically keeping you out of closed prison cells unless a transfer becomes absolutely unavoidable. Just to give you a clearer picture of what that open regime, or regime aberto, actually looks like, Article 36 relies heavily on the auto-discipline of the convicted person. They're actually allowed to leave during the day to work or take courses without direct surveillance, but, and this is a big but, they have to return to be confined at night and on their days off. It's really designed as a structured transition back into normal society. Now this number? Incredibly important, 40. Under Article 75, the absolute maximum time a person can serve in private of liberty, meaning actual physical prison time, is explicitly capped at 40 years. That's it. Even if a judge sentences someone to hundreds of years for a bunch of different crimes, the system actually unifies those sentences to ensure nobody spends more than 4 decades behind bars. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of prescription, found in Article 109. Did you know crimes essentially have an expiration date? It's true. If the state doesn't manage to prosecute or punish a crime within a certain time frame, their legal right to do so completely expires. This table maps the whole thing out. For the most severe crimes, ones with penalties over 12 years, the state has 20 years to act. But for lighter crimes, that prosecution window shrinks down significantly.
Which brings us to a really pivotal question. Quais são os crimes contra a pessoa? What are the crimes against the person? Answering this moves us right out of the general rules and straight into the parte especial, the special part, where the specific crimes are actually laid out.
Section 4. Crimes contra a vida. Offenses against life. Now, if you are a fan of filmes baseados em fatos reais, those intense true crime movies based on real events, you will definitely recognize this. The dramatic courtroom reveals in those films usually hinge right here, on these exact modifiers. Article 121 defines a basic homicide, but here we are looking at homicidio qualificado. These are the aggravating conditions that seriously elevate the severity of the crime, like was the motive totally futile? Were the means exceptionally cruel, like using poison or fire? Was the method a literal ambush? Or was the target an authority figure or maybe a minor under 14? Hitting any of these qualifiers significantly pumps up the prison time handed down by the judge. A highly specific and very severe classification that was added to the code is feminicidio, now codified under Article 121A. The law very clearly categorizes this as killing a woman specifically for reasons of the condition of the female sex. This encompasses cases involving domestic and family violence or evident contempt and discrimination against the condition of being a woman. And it carries a massive penalty of 20 to 40 years of reclusion.
Moving on to Section 5, Crimes contra a honor, defending reputation.
People mix these terms up all the time in everyday conversation, but the Penal Code makes very clear distinctions between Articles 138, 139, and 140. Calumnia is when you falsely accuse someone of a specific crime. Difamação, or defamation, is spreading a fact, even if that fact is true, that ruins someone's public reputation. And injuria is directly offending someone's personal dignity or decorum. There are basically three very distinct ways to break the law just by using your words. Let's move to our final segment, Section 6. A atualização do código, modern additions. Check out this incredibly modern addition under Article 146-A, Intimidation Systematic Virtual, otherwise known as cyberbullying. The code now explicitly penalizes systematic intimidation happening over computer networks, social media, apps, or even online games. Doing this in a digital environment, it can now literally land someone in prison for up to 4 years. And what about the tech we carry around every day? Article 154-A covers the invasion of an informatics device. If someone breaches a smartphone or laptop to obtain, alter, or destroy data without authorization, or installs malware to get an illicit advantage, the Penal Code is ready to prosecute that directly. The law has officially stepped out of the physical world and right into our pockets. In that same vein, the traditional concept of theft under Article 155 has been drastically expanded. Digital theft now carries severe penalties for fraud committed via electronic devices or malicious programs. And remarkably, the code explicitly jacks up the penalty if the crime is committed using servers maintained outside the national territory. It's a clear recognition of the borderless, global nature of modern digital crime. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. How does a document written way back in 1940 continue to define the absolute boundaries of modern society today? Well, as we've seen, it is a legal framework that bends and adapts. It absorbs new definitions of violence, it acknowledges digital borders, and it continually recalculates the cost of breaking our social contract. Justice, it seems, is never a finished blueprint.